Michelle O'Keefe, I'm delighted to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So what's funny is I've wanted to get you onto the podcast kind of ever since we met. So I don't know if you remember this, but we met at a conference. We were both sneaking out a little bit early and it really epitomized the elevator pitch. So we were both in the lift and we said to one another, "What do you do? What do you do?" We had about 30 seconds to explain it. And then we ended up walking halfway across Dublin because both of our cars were parked in the same place.
That's right.
So I got to know a lot about Platform 55 and I'm delighted to have you on to explore your journey as a founder, but also talk about Platform 55. And maybe that's a nice place for us to start. Would you mind maybe telling listeners a little bit about Platform 55?
Sure, no problem. So I think when I met you, Mark, it must have been pretty early days, and I'm sure the elevator pitch probably took halfway across Dublin to get it out because we hadn't nailed it at that point. But you know, in a concise sentence, what we're doing is we're transforming how you support modern families at work, and these are solutions for both HR, for people leaders, and for the employees themselves. So that's kind of our tagline or our mission. But what that actually means for an organisation is we find a lot of companies have great policies in place, but they're not being translated into the day-to-day. They're not being translated for the employee who wants to avail of them, and certainly the people leaders who have to, work through that situation with the employee. So at a basic level, if I use one example, which we'll probably get to as my own example as well from a personal lived experience point of view, if you take someone who is working in an organisation and they find out they're expecting, there's usually a maternity policy there. But when they go to advise their people leader and HR that they're expecting, sometimes that experience isn't great. During that journey, the people leader mightn't have the right tools they need to help that person both leave the organisation for their leave, but also re-onboard them after their family leave. The people leader mightn't be equipped to do that. The person on that maternity journey often leaves, wondering about what their role, their safety and the security, because you do hear a lot of stories about roles changing. But then when they return from maternity leave, they return with a sense of one of the biggest emotions that mums return with is guilt for leaving baby for the first time. They return with anxiety, trepidation, they're worried about their role. They've a lot of anxiety returning to that role. And often the company is not set up to support that return. And then what happens is there's attrition post-family leave. So 80% of the gender pay gap is attributed to the motherhood penalty. So that's why we see a lot of females falling off career progression kind of in around that age group. And it's when you're about to progress into senior leadership roles. So the implications for an organisation is they don't have a great talent pipeline for senior females coming up the ranks because we're losing a lot of talent. The cost of attrition is 240% of the annual salary of the person they've lost. They've also lost knowledge capital because you've invested a lot in someone. The average age of a woman having a baby in Ireland is currently 33. So, you're well past graduate stage and, you've invested a lot from that point of view. And often they leave because of an experience with a direct line manager who mightn't be trained to handle these conversations. Now, maternity is one journey, I suppose, we can discuss. It's exactly the same for the dads, paternity, and only 1 in 10 dads take their full leave because stigma is still associated with that. Similarly, if you're going on a surrogacy journey or an IVF journey, are your people leaders and your company set up to handle that? And that's all the problems we solve for organisations that we're working with.
Incredible. And as I'm listening to you, what springs to mind for me is this idea: we're told now to bring our whole selves to work. But obviously some of the stats that you've actually just given us there, it seems like there's not many of us being able to bring our whole self to work.
Absolutely. And that's another stat I have. I'm going to be a stat dictionary today or whatever the equivalent is. But 62% of people hide something about themselves. So that we're certainly not bringing our whole selves to work. And when we delve into the things that people are hiding about themselves, a lot of them relate to family. So we're very much about supporting families, working families. So things like parenting through separation, unfortunately, is a big trend we've seen post-pandemic. I think we all know how touchy things got up when we were locked up at home for 3 years, but some relationships didn't make it through. And we're seeing a lot of people that are parenting through separation or solo parenting. That's something that you mightn't want to bring to the workplace. Parents of children with special education needs is another one. So when we're onboarding a client, we do a digital diagnostic with them and we ask working parents, what is causing you the most stress at the moment? And these are things that cause enough stress that make you maybe not be able to turn up for work or turn up and not be present. So there are a lot of commercial implications to the questions we ask as well. But the things that have come up repeatedly are parents of children with high anxiety, parents of children with special education needs, solo parenting, or caring for an elderly relative. I'm not a parent myself, but I'm caring for an elderly relative. So those are the things that keep coming up. And are people bringing that to the workplace? Not often enough. And that's often, again, back to the point that the ecosystem around them is not set up to have that conversation. The line managers haven't been trained in empathetic leadership.
And I think it's really interesting because, just on that point that you're talking about, not being able to potentially bring our whole selves to work, even have an opportunity to have that discussion. What I tend to find, and, it's interesting because our brains work like this, this whole idea of cause and effect, right? So if I'm not having that discussion with my manager in regard to that problem, or I don't feel there's an environment where I can have that discussion, well, all of a sudden then I start to create these stories in my own head. So for example, it could be the mother who's coming back into the workforce has not had that reassurance and all of a sudden creates this story that maybe I won't be able for it, maybe they won't be accommodating. And then maybe, as you say, we lose another incredible part of our talent pool within our organization because we haven't enabled those conversations. We haven't offered that support.
That's exactly it. And it can be so basic. So, and you've hit the nail on the head. All those emotions are what women feel when they come back to the workplace. Or has someone else that has been covering my role, done a better job? Was I able to do this job in the first place? Like, you do forget all that. You lose a lot of confidence. It doesn't take long to come back. But what always happens when you come back from maternity leave, no matter what your childcare situation is that you will get that call to say the temperature is 39.9, or there's hand, foot and mouth in the creche, or there's measles, or whatever it is. It's going to be within the first few weeks of you going back. That guilt you feel for taking time off is now compacted by this call from creche or childcare or mother-in-law, whoever it is, and the panic that comes with that, and the guilt. And when you have that experience a couple of times, that is where people, we have this graph that tracks the maternity leave journey. And actually, when you come back, first of all, that the first week is a honeymoon period. And that's when typically managers check in to say, welcome back. Are you okay? Have you got your laptop and have you got everything? But you need to check in 3 and 6 weeks later, because that's when things are going downhill fast. But we say to managers, when somebody comes back from maternity leave, say to them, listen, no doubt we're going to get the call about the temperature in the next few weeks, and just take that pain point away, because it is going to happen. And then, we'll deal with that. But even by saying we know that's going to happen, that changes everything for a returning mum.
And it's sad as well to hear the stats around the dads as well. Only 1 in 10 taking their paternity leave. I'm not quite there yet myself, but when we do get there, myself and my wife, I'm sure the team in Fifth Vision will understand that they won't be seeing me for a while, because I think, that period in your life, it's, it may happen once if you're lucky, or, you've got to grab it. You've got to really enjoy that moment. And it's sad to hear that so many are rushing back, and no doubt their stories being created of, I need to be back, I need to be visible.
Yeah, it's funny. We very quickly fall into caregiver and breadwinner roles with mums and dads. So, dads have a sense of they need to provide for the family. We took to Grafton Street to do a vox pop and ask men their opinion on this. And there was still a lot of men who felt, it's a long time, I need to get back to work, I need to provide. But the general consensus was, especially with younger men that aren't parents now but plan to be in the future, is they would expect paternity leave, extended paternity leave from their employer, and they will want to spend that time to embed their family together. And it is so important. On my first baby, my husband got 2 days paternity leave, and it's shocking to think, like, it has changed, but still a lot of men don't take it. We've had comments said to men in work, I know we have a paternity policy, but you're not actually going to take all that leave, are you? So that's what's happening. That's still happening. International Women's Day is coming up, and we've put a call out to men to come to discuss how we can change gender equality. And the more men take their leave, it actually really assists with women increasing their seniority in leadership roles. Yeah,
no doubt you can see that. And I'm really curious to explore your journey as a founder, because I read your article on Sunday in The Independent that was really interesting. And obviously this business, Platform55, it's not your first business that you've founded.
No.
Tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, as a founder.
Sure. How far do you want me to go back? So I suppose digital marketing is my training. It's what I studied in college. I was one of the first digital marketeers in Ireland, and by the age of 24, I knew absolutely everything, and I set up my first business. After 7 years working in eBookers, the online travel agent, so I knew a lot about digital marketing then. And I set up a travel tech business, and that was basically to track where your sales were coming from if you were an online travel company. So I was backing all the travel content on like RTE, Aircom, MSN, all of that. And I plug in travel partners and then track the value of the sale. The problem was that it was probably a bit early. People were searching online for travel but not booking. And mine was on a cost per sale model. It was an affiliate program. I was recognised in a hothouse program for Enterprise Ireland that year as like one of the high potential startup companies, and I was named Entrepreneur of the Year by Minister Conor Lenihan at the time. And 6 months after I was named Entrepreneur of the Year, I had to close the business down, and that was because the crash had happened in 2008, and travel was one of the first industries to be really impacted by it. So a lot of my customers went out of business. But I'll take personal responsibility as well. Like there were some things that I probably wasn't monitoring as closely as I should have been, and it's something we might chat about later on. But I was generating revenue, but the cost of that was high. So my margins really weren't great, but I was distracted by revenue and by some of the bling, some of the contracts I was winning. So that was a really tough time. I'd also convinced my husband to join the company, which was a great idea. We just got married, and so we found ourselves both out of work. And I didn't realise as well that there was no support from the government if you were self-employed when you lose your job. So there was no financial support there. So I went down to sign on to get a bit of support while we figured out our next moves, and there was nothing there for us. That's since changed as well. So I wasn't long out of work. I did a couple of interviews, but there was a month or two where I just didn't really feel like talking to anybody. It was a massive sense of failure. I probably went into a dark place, and I was embarrassed because I'd been quite vocal about my successes, and then when you have to fold, it's difficult to let a team go, and that was very difficult. So
and just on that, Michelle, Entrepreneur of the Year, and 6 months later, so you've gone from literally being at, you couldn't get much higher at that stage in terms of your early founder
Absolutely,
journey.
Yeah.
And obviously then you've experienced the complete opposite to that only 6 months after.
Yeah, and I'd also taken investment in to help grow the business. So I had investors that I had to really quickly say, this is over. It was a short run for them. So there was a lot of shame and embarrassment that came with that stage. And I was young.
Yeah.
So and it's taken me a long time to realize the learnings and the benefit of that experience. And I couldn't see that at the time. So that was hard. And I think that's really important, for people if they are on an entrepreneurial journey. I think people sometimes can get caught up in either a startup world where there are lots of conversations and awards and you can be recognized. But like when you actually dig deep into your business, what's there? Is there margin? Is there a product? And don't get caught up with the shiny stuff. You have to actually make sure there's something behind that.
You've got to be driven by the data and the right type of data in terms of your business.
Yeah, profitability and margin. Now, look, there's loads of successful companies that you'll hear about that, aren't generating revenue yet, that took investment in and they're valued at X. But like, if you are operating a business that's generating revenue, you need to look at your margin. That is the bottom line. That's the most important thing.
Can I ask you, and sorry to...
No, go ahead.
You talked about you've been able to capture the learnings now, right? But I'd be curious to ask you when that period happened, because I think some of our listeners would be founders and some would be young founders. And I think a lot of the time they have the first idea, and when that first idea doesn't work, they can't really understand that actually, the fact that you are tolerant to taking risks, right? That's nearly the skill that you need. And there's going to be a number of potential ideas. Not all of them will work, but to stop after the first idea not working.
That's it. If you have gone and started something, you've already done something that most people won't. You're already an entrepreneur. If it didn't work, you've already got something in your toolkit that's going to help you for your next one. And that's really important. I didn't go again for on my own business. I went into full-time employment for loads of reasons. But, we were early family planning, security, ego, like many things. And I went into employment, but I knew somewhere deep down that I would go again. But I just needed to kind of stabilize myself and make a few bob and get money back in the bank. So it was very nice being paid every month without doubt, because even as when things were going well with the business, I would pay everyone else. And then if there was something left, I would pay myself and the hubby. Yeah. We were the last ones. So, it was hit and miss with income. So it was very nice just to get consistently paid when I went back into employment. So I worked for the Irish Times Group then for 8 years. And during that time, I excelled quite quickly, early days with them. And I also became pregnant during that time. And I was told in the rotunda on a checkup that I was going to be induced the next day, and it was quite early. So I dashed back to the office to grab my laptop and run out the door. And they asked me why I hadn't gone for the MD position that was advertised. And I said, because I'm pregnant. That's where my head was at. Yeah. I couldn't go for the role. And this is another issue we deal with. Yeah. But I just didn't feel like I could put myself forward because I was going to be going on leave. So they said, would you consider taking the role? And I said, I would, but I'm having a baby tomorrow. So they said, that's no problem. So they offered me the job of MD, and I took my full 6 months maternity leave. So I came back to a senior role, a new team, and a lot of changes, and a new baby, and a big commute. Wow. So that's essentially where the whole plan for Platform 55 begun, was from that experience of holding a senior role and having a young family.
And what was that like?
It was interesting. So on my first baby, I came back, and it was very difficult. All the things we just spoke about. Like, I remember coming back, and the girl who covered me said, "Would you want to run the sales meeting this morning?" And I said, "No, you keep going. I'm just going to observe." And she put a number up on the board, and I didn't know whether it was a date, a sales target, like mileage. I literally couldn't figure out what was what. So, all of those emotions that we discussed, I was a bit lost. And also I felt I had to prove myself in this new role. I was one of the youngest female MDs in the media industry. So I felt I had to prove myself. All of the pressure that came with that was from me. That wasn't from the organisation. My CEO, Dermot Hanrahan, he was just fabulous. He was one of the most progressive CEOs I've ever worked for. So he was the one promoting someone MD when they were walking to the door on maternity leave. He was one of the first. Wow. I was one of the first people I know to get offered a 4-day week after my second baby. So the pressure wasn't coming from him. The pressure was coming from me to prove myself in the role, but then also to be a great mum to my new baby, who was only 6 months old, and keep all the other plates spinning. So I actually became really sick about, I think it was about 8 weeks back in the role. And, I can recognize now, which was absolutely stress-related issues, but I was quite sick. I was taken into Beaumont for a few days. And again, it's taken me a long time to look back and say, that was too much. I actually that was way too much. But only now I can see that. I thought at the time I was having a reaction to something else, So I can see that clearly. But things settled down, and I delivered amazing results and growth in revenue and growth in team. We won every single contract we went for. I was killing it. And then I got myself pregnant again. So after my second baby was when I came back and realised, because I wasn't going to have any more, I realised this is it. That commute, this daily grind, dropping the kids off at 7 o'clock in the morning, picking them up at 7 o'clock in the evening, not getting to see them. I was like, I don't think I can do this. This isn't right. Now, as I said, I was offered a 4-day week then, but something still wasn't right with the whole thing. And even though I was being well looked after, I could see other female peers in industry who definitely weren't getting the opportunities that I was getting, or the flexibility that I was getting, and they were stepping away from their careers. So I was thinking, is this it? You have a baby and you're gone, and something has to change. But I was also looking at my husband, who got 2 days paternity leave, and he was having sleepless nights, and nobody was asking him in his office, how he was doing, or does he need some flexible time to get used to the new family arrangements, which is a big deal for the dads. It absolutely is. So the brain kind of kicked in, and with the travel technology I built, because it was new and it was different, and no one really, I felt like I had really great knowledge on the industry. I was really excited about this, but this Platform 55 felt different. It was, I'm going to solve a problem that's a problem for me, but I can see it's a problem for everyone around me, and something has to change, from a societal point of view, but it has to start with the employers.
And can I ask you, knowing that this was something really close to your heart, did that give you the courage to go again?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think like I had loads of ideas, in between failing and being in full-time employment. I was all like, the ideas just come. They
Cogs
come.
keep on spinning.
Keep on spinning. But this personal experience and realizing how big a challenge it is, I was just thinking, sure, everybody must be in the same boat. Like something has to change. So it came from a different place. When I was 24 and I set up my first travel tech business, I wanted a yacht in Dubrovnik. This was the end goal of that business. This was something else. This is because I genuinely saw a need for change. I'd still like the yacht, but we'll see about that.
You've really touched on something there. I think that's very important, is obviously that idea of your definition of success in terms of running a business. What does that real definition look like? And no doubt that changes as we move through our life. You obviously put it really nicely there. The yacht in Dubrovnik sounds amazing. Well, maybe not so much now, maybe 10 years ago for myself as well. But in terms of your definition for success with Platform55, for you, like what does success for you and I mean this as in, I'd love to give other founders, other business owners, a little bit of an insight into how you make your business work for you.
I suppose, and I will say, like, I am driven commercially, that's always going to be there. I wouldn't be in business if I didn't want to succeed commercially, but there's so much more in there now as well. So at the end of the day, when we run sessions, so just to explain the product very quickly, we would partner with an organization. They would get access to the platform. Sorry, the platform is a platform for the 55% of the workforce who are working parents. That's why we're called Platform55. Right. So one of our partners would get access to that. Their employees can access whatever support they need. So whether they're returning from maternity leave, going on paternity leave, if they have a child with special education needs, if a manager needs to help somebody through a miscarriage, the manager gets the training and support they want. So everybody can access what they want when they want it. It's very difficult for an organisation to decide how they're going to support. Like say we're going to run a menopause session today. Just because you're running today doesn't mean that people are going to be struggling with it today. So we give them the platform to access exactly what they want when they want it. And it really reduces hassle and admin for HR. So they're just signposting and saying, okay, that's no problem. There's a resource there for you and there's training, there's coaching. So it's what you need when you need, or what you want when you need it. So when we do that, and every month we have our maternity re-onboarding sessions running, we bring a number of women together that are coming back to the workplace, so they kind of support each other. And we ask for feedback at the end of all of our sessions. It's really important for us to understand what's working, what's not working, where people need more support. And there are a few free field boxes there. When we hear how we've impacted individuals' ability to balance family better, they've made a decision on how they're going to approach their career. When you read that, like it genuinely makes me emotional. And that's the impact to the end user. That's the person that we want. That's why we started the business. It was to really help that end user. And then the side benefits are like we're now appearing in gender pay gap reports. We're being described as the S in ESG reporting. Like the commercial outputs for a business are amazing, but we're doing what we want to do. So success for me is supporting the people who are like me, 12 years ago, supporting those individuals. And our goal, or my personal goal over the next 5 years, will be to support 1 million families. We're already delivering, we're supporting 42,000 employees in Ireland, and we're delivering in 7 European languages. We're not fully global yet, but we are we're pan-European at the moment. So for me, personally, it would be to support over 1 million families to make sure that they can have a career and a family life and not feel stretched on both sides all the time. So that's my personal mission. And
do you think in today's society we're open to that? We're getting there?
That's a good question. I do a lot of business development, so I would be out talking to clients, explaining what we do, and we have been described as that parenting thing and, kind of taken off the agenda, or we might look at that, budgets are done. So it's not seen as business critical to some legacy style or boards.
How do you feel about that? Because obviously we sit in a similar bracket.
We do. It's been a challenge for me, and I'm actually in the middle of reworking our sales material and our messaging. We've started working with a PR company to see if we can really get our messaging clear and out there. So, by saying that you're supporting maternity and paternity leavers, that can often be a pain point for organizations. So they're thinking, this already cost me a lot of money. I I don't want to to invest any more time in this. But on the same hand, you're talking about 55% of your employees who are going to be parents, there are parents, and 94 that want to be. Some of those companies would spend more on a pride event, which would account for less than 2% of their employees. So it's hard when you kind of get pushed back like that. So we're reworking our messaging to really focus on the business outputs. So this is 240% of an annual salary and knowledge capital that you're going to lose. This is your action plan to support gender pay gap. This is going to be what you need for your ESG reporting. So when you have clients like that don't get it, you can give them the commercials. We have so many clients that do get it. Like, we work with some amazing clients. We're working with Irish Life, AXA, KPMG, Qualtrics, Kerry Group, or Nua. Just fabulous clients that want to change what's happening in their organization, want to make sure their employees feel supported, and want to change the gender balance at executive level. So we started working with AXA 2 years ago. They had 75% male exec at executive level, and now they've just reported back to us that it's 50-50. So this was a goal they had for themselves. A lot of our partners say we want to change the gender balance at our senior levels. In many organizations, gender equality is female biased before mid-management, equal at mid-management, and as soon as we get into the top tier, it becomes male heavy. So we're working with those organizations in changing that. But they also genuinely want to support employees that might be dealing with something like caring for an elderly parent or caring for a child with special education needs, where that individual might need some accommodations and just a little bit of understanding, or else they're going to walk.
Yeah. And that's why, as you've described really nicely there, as we continue to move up the ladder, if you like, there's less and less, I suppose, opportunity for females to rise to those senior executive positions, because maybe the supports were not put in place. And obviously not just females, but other individuals within the workforce who are maybe caring for an elderly parent. The supports are not there at maybe mid-management level, so they never really get to explore what it might be like to step into that role in time.
That's it. And it's a very temporary squeezed time when you have a young family. Like, you're soon, kids are soon at school and you're fully available to progress. And we see that all the time in the returner's journey, that they feel right now isn't the right time for me to move on. But like a few months later or a year later, they're ready to go again.
And that goal that you've mentioned about, obviously, reaching that amount of people. You spoke there as well about enlisting, obviously, the help of a PR agency to kind of get that message. And by the way, I've certainly taken inspiration from how you translate the benefits of what you do, because we're the same. When we're with companies that are very forward thinking, it's easy because they understand the benefits. But actually, I think it's when you're sitting with people who want to see the data, they want you to put it into their terms. I think when you can do that, you've really obviously taken the next step, if you like. So I do certainly take inspiration from you guys in terms of what you've done in that space.
Well, ask me in a few months how well it translated, but yeah, hopefully.
When you think about achieving that goal and you think about your role as a founder, what pillars do you have to put in place to really achieve that goal that you're setting? Because obviously it's a lofty goal.
Yeah.
But what supports do you need in your role as a founder to help you get there? You've talked about the PR agency, but what else? What else is critical for you in order to achieve that goal?
So one thing I probably should have called out very early in our chat is that I have a co-founder, Tracy Gunn. And that is a game changer when you have somebody else on this journey with you. And actually, it's commonly known and documented that from an investor point of view and venture capitalist point of view are more likely to back a founder team than an individual founder. And that is just down to the fact that like one person can have a crazy idea that may not work, but two people going for the same idea gives it a little bit more credibility. So I have a co-founder with literally not only the opposite skill set to me, but she is the opposite in personality. Like, I turn up all in black, she turns up all in white. We couldn't be more different. And when you're on that journey together, if I'm having a bad day or, have had a no from a client, she will pick me up and vice versa. And that's really helpful to keep going on this journey, because I don't know, it is a long and lonely journey when you're setting up your own business. It's hard to get the no's, and having someone else on that journey with you is really valuable. So that's, half the battle.
Yeah.
I think I was just saying to you when we came in as well, I took an office in The View in Malahide. for me, separating home and work is really important, even though it sounds bizarre, considering the line of work that we're in. But I need to walk away from my home and go to work and feel like I'm at work and leave that behind. Don't get me wrong, I cross over all kinds of boundaries and work evenings and late nights when I have to, or a weekend, but that'll be on my terms when I need to. But I also know when I need to pull back. So that's really important to find my workspace. One of the things I recognized early on with the travel tech business was finance is not a strong point for me. So much so that I think I had 13 months in my first forecast. But I learned a lot working with the Irish Times Group. I had an amazing mentor there who was CFO, and I upskilled a lot in finance. But I think if you have a real weakness, go and find a solution to that, whether that's outsourcing it or bring someone in or go and get training. Don't try and do everything yourself, and attention to detail is not a strong point for me. And I remember we had to do a huge piece of work of copying all these links to enable access in the back end. And I was there was a few errors, let's just say, it wasn't a good use of my time. So I then hired a VA, and she's amazing. And that work gets done perfect. It's perfect.
Yes.
And it's not using up my time where I need to be out talking to clients and being at events and running events and being on really important podcasts, having these conversations. So it frees up my time. So know where you should be spending your time, I think is really important as well.
I think that's a really nice piece of advice to give to, small teams, founders, whether it's 1, 2, 5 people. Because you do, as a founder, you are a jack of all trades, but also it gets to a point where you realize, okay, maybe I've gotten it to a certain stage, and now I need to really hold that mirror up in front of me and say, right, what is my strengths? How do I play to those? And what are the gaps that I really need to fill in the business?
Yeah. And for me, finance is one that you can't mess around with, and it's back to making sure you have a margin, that your business is going to be profitable. There might be money coming in now, but is it scalable? Are you paying yourself a salary? Those things, all those foundations are so important. And if they're not analysed at the start, you can end up going down a journey of a huge commitment and taking on debt and never really unraveling the fact that it was never going to be profitable.
Yeah. It's critically important to do that. And yet we can get caught up in the day-to-day of running a business. And as you say, you mentioned earlier on, revenue coming in, some good clients.
Throw in an award there with a picture and you're away.
But you've got to look at that 3, 4, 5-year forecast. When are you going to be, turning a profit if you're not right away? What's the costs going to look if you've got another 5 to 10 people in your team? But it is something that a lot of founders, they tend to not spend enough time on, or maybe not iterate as they are moving through their business journey.
Yeah. And I think on the other side of that, there's such a challenge in forecasting, what business you're going to close, especially when you're in the line of work that we both do. So you could be talking to clients and there is no one I spoke to that doesn't think this is a great idea, but are they going to spend with me this quarter? Are they going to spend with me this year? It's very hard to understand that in the current market as well.
It is, because actually that's another interesting one. We'd obviously have another podcast episode on that, but obviously the current way of working, again, you look at a lot of the hybrid working policies that are out there. There's no doubt that little bit of flexibility is here to stay, but we're seeing an ever increasing reduction in that flexibility. So the environment we're in right now could look completely different in 12 months' time, maybe even 6 months' time.
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be change and flex in work environments. We work with some companies like pharmaceuticals who would have production line or airline that can't give flexible working. So for us, the constant is maternity, paternity, and leaders leading through that. That's never going to change. You're always going to have people on your team who are having families and leadership that need to understand how to support that. So we'll flex with the external environment, and we always build that into our training. We're very agile as a startup. We can quickly create a solution to whatever the problem is, but at the crux of this is how do organizations support families.
Excellent. And you mentioned a word there which is certainly high in my dictionary, agile, right? So obviously being agile, being able to adapt as a founder with a business is obviously very important. For you, where do you draw the line a little bit on that? Like, and obviously I'm asking you candidly because we can say yes to everything and then we find ourselves, if we're trying to get Platform 55 known for what it does, same with Fit Vision, and we're asked something that's a bit outside our scope, how do you go back and say, right, hold on a minute, actually, we're agile, but we're not quite that agile?
So I am probably like the ultimate salesperson at heart. If someone came in and said, can you bring dancing clowns into our office? I would say, absolutely. And then I go back to Tracy and say, no, listen, we need to get some dancing clowns. So she keeps me on the straight and narrow as well, because she does a lot of design of our product. And we know what we're good at and we know what we're not good at. Sorry, we don't know what we're not good at. We know what we're good at. And we maintain a score of 9.2 on all of the sessions that we deliver. So if we go off piece and start saying we can do this and do that, it won't be our strong point. So we have to stay in our lane. We are considered a D&I solution. Often that's where budget comes from. But the only diversity that we are looking at is gender. So people would say, can you do race? Or, and we don't, because that's not our area. So we very much stay in our lane. However, if somebody says, look, we can't buy the full membership this year, or we just want to look at supporting mums and dads and we will do managers, we will, bend the product and make it work for them, but we don't go too far out of our lane. And we've learned that the hard way. Also, we are building for scale. We've got tech, we've built a platform, we want a one-to-many model. Every time you say, okay, well, we do something different for this client, you're taking resources and time and energy over here for not very much revenue. Whereas we know what we have here is working, and when you give people access to the platform, like the engagement rates we're getting are phenomenal. Like we were up in Belfast last week visiting some of our clients up there, Danske and Tuins and ALG, and our engagement rates are over 30% of their employees using the platform, which is unreal. Yeah. So if you do something bespoke for a client and they say, okay, today we're going to do returning from maternity on the 7th of July, Maria, who's just returned from maternity leave, that's the day she's going to get the call about the hand, foot, and mouth. She can't go on the 7th of July. Give them the platform, let them book in to the date that suits them, and it just works better. So I know, and sometimes to keep the lights on, we'll go off and do the bespoke stuff, and we will, but I know in my heart, to grow and scale this business, we're probably going to have to start saying no to things.
And I think it's really nice to actually hear that, to be honest. You're staying very true to your word. You believe in the product, in the platform that you provide and the way you provide it. And you're very much, I suppose, strident in terms of that's...
But I also see it working and working way better than when you go in on site or, bespoke dates. It doesn't suit anyone.
And I couldn't agree more with you in regard to having an option for people to be like, so obviously, just to contrast, for us, we can be there all of the time for some clients, which obviously is a different thing as well, because you're there all of the time. When I am asked to do things which are very much one-off, it's a wellness week or a wellness day, you and I know what way they generally turn out, right? So it is about trying to push back a little bit about that and actually saying exactly as you are, is this really meeting the need of the employee? Because maybe the employee isn't in on that day and that's the exact day, that's the exact thing that employee would have attended, but they're not in that day. So they have to wait till next year. So I think it's a really good point and a really good way to promote your product, because I think with the flexibility that we are seeking now within the workplace, our well-being benefits or our D&I benefits, supports, they all need to operate the same way with that flexibility for employees.
No, and that's exactly it. And no one is more stretched than a new mum or a new dad. You can't tell them this is happening at 5:30 or 2:30. Like that'll be guaranteed you'll have a challenge. So giving the power to the employee to access what they want. And again, if 62% of us are hiding something about ourselves, let them go on discreetly and book into a session about fertility treatment or miscarriage or whatever it is. Yeah. Let them access that without having to flag it up the ranks if that's what they need right now.
Michelle, last couple of minutes, and I like spending the last few minutes, and you touched on it earlier on. You talked about lessons that you learned from your first business. Obviously, at the time, they weren't as clear, but obviously over time, you were able to really use them in your current journey. If you were to look at some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned as a founder, from 24, as you mentioned, right up until today, what are some of those lessons that you might leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate, to fill your gaps. You don't know everything. You're obviously great at something if you've come up with an idea and managed to get it off the ground. But don't be afraid to get support in the areas. And it mightn't be a full-time role. It might just say you need support in social media or finance or whatever. Get that help. It'll really change. Or a virtual assistant to do the things that you're not great at, and it'll give you time to spend on the things that are important to you. I think. God, I'm taking a ton. I've learned so much, and I'm having a blank. Know when to call it if it's not working. I think that is probably something that I didn't do early enough, even with the travel tech business. You think about everybody else. You think about who you're going to let go, and the impact of your reputation, et cetera, et cetera. But like, if it's not working and you can see it, call it as early as you can, and it's going to hurt. But then you're out, and there'll be a little bit of relief at the end of it when you call it.
And how much of we said ego earlier on, right? Yeah. I always like to refer to the idea of how much is your identity attached to your business, and as a result, how long does it take you to realize that maybe it isn't going in the direction that you'd like it to go?
Yeah, and I think that's I love LinkedIn. I think it's a great platform. We have a business page and I have my own personal page, and my personal page gets so much more engagement and chat than the business page. And I realize people are interested in me and my own journey. So like, I'm not always posting about Platform 55. I might be posting about the kids and the challenge that I had over the Easter holidays because there's no care, whatever it is. And my story resonates, or my challenges as an entrepreneur, that resonates. And that's what my network like hearing about. And I'm not going to say if I wasn't doing Platform 55 and I was doing something else, I'd have the support of that network. So it's you as an individual. You build your own reputation, and if it's not working and you close it down, when you find the strength and you feel strong enough, you can go back to your network and say, well, that didn't work. I'm either looking for work or here's my next plan. And the amount of support that you will get for that is unreal. And people appreciating your honesty and, showing your vulnerability and, also calling it. I think that's really important. So your identity is not tied up in the business. And I learned that, but it took me a long time to figure that out. The other thing with in startups, and this is my last kind of I suppose message, is I used to mentor startups as well. But I often see startups getting caught up in accelerators and awards, and you can get caught in a loop, and it feels very rewarding to be recognized for the work that you're doing. But you can find yourself writing applications or presentations for that particular award or process, and tweaking your business plan to suit that one, because they might want more tech, or they might want to see more IP, or they might want to see more of this. So you're changing it all the time, whereas you're actually not picking the route of supporting your business, and getting caught up in that can actually do damage. So it's amazing to be recognized by industry for the work that you've done. And we have been, and they've been great awards, but we've always, again, entered based on what we're doing, what the reality is of what we're doing. And if it wins, it wins. And if it doesn't, we're not going to tweak and change our model or our description to suit a certain thing. And you can get caught up in that. So, always spend time on your business. Take a little time away from working in the business and spend it on the business. And I know that sounds a bit cliche, but you can get caught up in that, and you can get caught up in the day to day. I used to, before I worked out of the View Malahide, I used to just go over to the Portmarnock Links and pick a window seat and just, take a breath and review, what am I actually doing? What's actually happening here? Am I on track? And it's really important to do that. So don't get too caught up in the bright lights of startup world. Awards are amazing, but don't repurpose your business for them.
I'm so glad that you've said that as well, because similar to you, I mentor some young founders, and one that comes to mind only said to me he went through a period where he was spending so much time on these application forms that he was completely forgetting about the fact that
he had a business.
Yeah. It became so time consuming. And obviously, it's a startup operation. This is a one-person operation. So if he's spending all the time on these application forms, obviously very difficult then to give the right type of focus to your business. So as you say, find a right balance with that.
Absolutely. And if you find the balance, if you are working on your business and your business is being successful and you're reaching the goals that you set out for yourself, you will win the awards.
Michelle O'Keefe, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you
so
very much. I will be sure, obviously, to link all of the information about Platform 55. And I must say, that elevator pitch now, oh, it's come a long way since our conversation in the lift. Not that it wasn't very convincing that day
Oh,
either.
no, we don't need 5 miles to get it out of me now.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.